Yes, our speaker today is our own Patrick Handley, and I'm going to give you some background information which you might not remember of his multiple varied accomplishments in life. He is a licensed psychologist and interfaith minister. This is Reverend Patrick Handley, if you please.
Reverend Doctor.
Reverend Doctor, yes. Or is it Dr. Reverend? I'm never quite
And
sure.
I always like Jesse Jackson says he's the right Reverend Jesse
The
Jackson.
right Reverend Patrick
I'd
Handley.
like to have that word right in there, but
Okay, so
seems
the
a
right
little too
Reverend
much.
Dr. Handley.
RW.
He was
I think the
ordained.
word right really doesn't mean right or wrong. It means it's an honorary name from Latin or something.
Okay, shut up, Patrick. I'm going to try to get some more good stuff about you here. He was ordained by the New Seminary in New York, and he's a personality assessment specialist and created the Insight Inventory, a positive strengths-based identifier that helps people see the best in themselves and others. In his professional work, he focuses on helping people integrate their personality strengths and spirituality into the work, school, and personal relationships. He is the owner of Insight Inventory Publishing, and he's an accomplished horse trainer, which he didn't bother to mention on one of the largest horse training sites. And let's see, what else do we have? He is a fabulous artist. He is an oil painter of, I would call them monumental size paintings. They're so big that he can't carry them around to show them. So he's building his own studio for them. And that's taking a lot of his time presently. It's going to be on his own property here in the northern area of Kansas City. We applaud all his varied accomplishments in life. Patrick, take it away.
Okay. All right. Maybe Kyle, I think I will have you show the slides. That way I can see everyone. And if that doesn't work, then we'll. Okay. So today I'd like to do something a little different. This is the title of the original sin versus original blessing. We've talked sometimes with the board and worship committee groups, say, well, how about doing a session where everyone kind of starts talking early and shares their thoughts about these different ideas rather than waiting just for a coffee shop. So I'm not accepting any honorarium from this because I want you guys to be the speakers today. But what I'm going to do is be the provocateur. I've got a bunch of slides that I'm going to show you that presents a concept, an idea that may trigger something in you. Say, wow, I really believe this, I believe that. I learned these things growing up in the religion that I was involved with as a child, breaking away from this, adopting this. So I want you to join in at any time and make your comments. In fact, what I'm going to do is show you a few key slides first, and then Pastor Kyle, and you can say, and I'm just picking Joe because he always has an idea or thought on something, and Joe would say, well, go back to slide 3. I want to say something about that. And then Heather might say, go to slide 8. I want to say something about this other one that really. So in other words, this is going to be us talking about this concept, which is a huge one in the field of all religions. So the title of it is Original Sin versus Original Blessing. And of course, New Age religions have kind of shifted over to the original blessing side, but that's not where most are. So let's go to slide 2, Cal. So here's the kind of technical definitions. By the way, original sin wasn't conceived of until about 238 BC by the emperor or the Pope Constantine. So there wasn't a category for sin. He not only came up with this category, thought, well, we need a list of sins. So a little later in the presentation, I've got the list of the 7 deadly sins, and fortunately, a list of the 7 virtues. Okay, so it's a Christian concept stating that humans are born with a sinful nature due to Adam's disobedience. So you're born a sinner. And a lot of Judeo-Christian, fundamental Christian religions They're always casting out the devil, trying to get rid of sin. You're born a sinner, you've got to be saved. And that's a concept in Christianity, but not in a lot of religions. Original blessing on the bottom is a perspective that emphasizes the inherent goodness and the positive potential in people, that our primary state is one of divine blessing. Okay, so let's go to the next one slide. Okay, just 3 images there. So I got to researching this, and again, we can come back to these. Almost all the major religions in the world, and there are literally hundreds, but you talk about the major ones, have at some point this fall from grace. And for the Christian religion, the story is about Adam and Eve. And they were there in that beautiful garden. They had everything going for them. And then they sinned. And then that sin is passed on to all humans after that point. And of course, in that case, there was a story of the serpent tempted Eve, and then Eve tempted Adam and ate the apple, and there it is. And of course, then I grew up Catholic, and several others of you did. And it was important to baptize babies immediately or within that first year to wash away that original sin. But you were born sinful. And I remember being a little kid, I thought, how can that be, that little sweet little baby, all full of sin? Jeez. The other story was from Greece, Pandora's box. How many of you remember that one? Again, a woman. So men were probably writing these and blaming them on women, that here there was this box that you were never to open. And of course, what does she do? She decides to open the box, and this is 2,000 years before the Adam and Eve. So she opened the box, and out of the box came all of these evil things. And she closed the box, according to the story. There was one thing left in the box, thank goodness. And that was hope. Hope. Okay, so then there's Iona, and I'm probably not pronouncing it right, Doomsday. And they were Mesopotamia, not pronouncing that very well. And this was about 2,000 years before the Greeks. And this was a story of a couple, again, in love, living a perfect life, but she decides to go down to the underworld just on her own and help rescue someone or something. And in doing that, when she came back out, she brought all this evil back out with her. So son of a gun. We could go on this for a long time, but I just want you to kind of think on this, say, when I hear those stories, that makes me feel this way, or I really reject this idea of course, every woman here would say, I reject this idea of this always being blamed on women. What the heck? And but those pervaded our culture. Okay, let's go to another slide. We can come back to this. And then the Pope came out with the 7 deadly sins. I put this slide in there a couple of times. So I just want to, I'm not going to belabor it right now. We're going to look at it a little later and say, is it possible that what we call sins were really success attributes in early evolution of humans? That it was good, in order to survive, you had to practice some of these things. And it wasn't till later that we decided, oh, too much of that is not a good thing. So let's go to the next slide. These aren't in any particular order. The Chinese never had this concept of original sin. And a lot of the Eastern religions, Buddhism and what was carried there was a little, it was called, we call it yin and yang, but it was known as, if somebody can pronounce this better for me, I'd love to hear it, but Taijitu. Melly knows I butcher every language or word with my country accents, but that's what that symbol is. And their concept was there's a little bit of good in everything that's bad. There's a little bit of bad in everything that's good. That it's not like you were born bad with original sin and have to be saved, but that in all things, there's opposing forces. There's the dark, there's the light, there's the good, there's the evil. And this was in place, you know, they say 2,000 to 1,500 years before Christianity started. Okay, another one. I was hoping Dan would be here this morning because he's our music guy. And one time he mentioned he loves Steppenwolf. And so I put this in there because it again is a modern culture way of doing yin and yang. So Steppenwolf, most of us know as that was a band in the 70s, and they had that famous song, hard rock, Born to Be Wild. And so you wonder, where'd they get that name Steppenwolf? Well, Hermann Hesse, which was a philosopher and writer, wrote a novel called Steppenwolf. And that cover of the book I love. The novel was about a person living a normal, good life, but he's always followed by the primitive wolf behind him that wants to be wild, that wants to do evil. And yet he's trying to live a good life, but he's always tempted by the evil nature or the bad or all the seven deadly sins, so to speak. And so when the band formed, they picked that as their name. That's the reason they call themselves Steppenwolf. Okay, some of you may remember some of those lyrics. I want to talk about that. Go ahead, Kyle. Okay, so here's my big question, and you can comment on this shortly. Could the concept of original sin versus original blessing be based as much on an evolutionary stage as it is on religion? Is that where it really came from, rather than a story in a Bible or a story in a Quran or a story? Did it evolve, this concept, just as humans evolved? All right, next slide. Okay. I have to tell you a quick story on this. So my first day in graduate school, being a PhD student, I was told, by my advisor, be sure to take a course by Bob Callis was his name. He's long since passed away, and he's well known. So he came in, he was a chain smoker. He didn't just smoke cigarettes. He lit one cigarette. You remember those days? He lit one cigarette to the other cigarette and smoked it. Then he had another one, he lit it to. So he was hoarse and crusty and all this. And so here we were, first class, first day PhD students. He writes this on the chalkboard. There's no flat screens in those days. Ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. He said, if you don't understand that, he said, this explains everything about psychology and sociology. And if you don't understand that, you're lost. And he walked out of the room. So his first lecture was about 2 minutes long, smoking, by the way. And I looked around, I remember, and thought, I don't think I know what any of those three words mean, let alone what the concept means. And let's say, so we're going to talk about that because I have never forgotten that. And I do think it explains a lot. Okay, I'm going to give you a little 101, next slide, to be thinking about it. So ontogeny is the evolution of the small. Recapitulate means it repeats. Phylogeny, if I'm pronouncing that quite right, is the evolution of the species. So in other words, an embryo or a cell, when it first divides once, twice, three times, it mirrors the species. All mammals look pretty much the same the first few weeks of their embryonic growth. And then they start divulging, and then they repeat due to their DNA, the species. So in psychology, they say the development of the individual matches the development of the culture. That the culture can't get much past the development of the individual can't get much past the development of the culture. That we're held back, we're kind of unaware of it. But if our culture isn't thinking of blessings and giving and positive, then we're held back by the development of the individual is held back by the culture is held back. And then that last one, the average personal spirituality tends to reflect the level of society's overall spiritual views. Well, we could talk for an hour about that, but that's the concept, kind of tuck that away. Next slide. That one's showing kind of odd on my screen. That bottom line was supposed to go all the way across. I don't know if you can adjust that, Kyle, but it just may be the way it came through.
Yeah, give me one sec.
Yeah, so, or I can show it on mine.
Yeah, if you want to try on yours, I think it was just formatting when I copied
Yeah,
yours.
it's probably formatting, the very thing we were talking about. Me. Okay, so here's that concept again. So, and as it pertains to us, Center for Universal Oneness, that'd be way over here on universe. So we started out as humans, we had our clans, family groups, and that was important to survival. Then we got a little more advanced, we grew into tribes, and we grew into regions, and our religion followed this, and our culture followed this. And then countries, nations, worlds, and universe. So what I'm putting out there is we call ourselves the Center for Universal Oneness. We'd like to be thinking over here in this universe. We all are one. But that may not be where the world is at. That may not be where the nation is at. And by the way, this doesn't mean, thank goodness for outliers. Outliers change the norm. But you can be an outlier and feel like, geez, where's that? Why doesn't the rest of them, aren't they thinking universe and world? Why are they thinking region or even tribe? We started out our conversation while we were waiting to 10 o'clock to arrive and thinking about the Chiefs. You know, there's a good example of sports. We're pretty tribal when it comes to sports. We don't want another tribe to win. We don't want for anybody even to show up in the Chief Stadium with a different uniform on. And it's kind of fun to resort back to that because there's a little thing in our brain, and that's called the amygdala. I'll hold it up here, maybe. It's no bigger than that, but it regulates our emotions. And whenever we're in fear, like losing our tribe or that regulates our emotions. So it's very easy to resort back to this way of thinking. It's in the back of our evolutionary mind. We can be 1 minute thinking of the world and universe as a spiritual place, and the next thing somebody's walking onto our yard and tearing it up, and then we become tribal, or we become protective of our territory. Okay, next slide. So I got several for you to go back to. I'm about done here. So our survival evolutionary wise was pretty much you've got to get in a group. Humans just could not survive without being in groups, other than a few outliers. I know there's always outliers. The wolf man on the hill that somehow has enough survival skills to survive, but that doesn't grow the species. So in general, most of us rely on groups. And the big challenge psychologically is how do you get in the group? How do you get a role in a group? And then how do you move ahead or sustain that role? So some people want to become leaders of their group. Others don't care about it at all. They're satisfied being the witch doctor or the healer or the caretaker. But a role is important. And as soon as that group forms, then there's this need to protect the group territory. I've got all these books that I was going to talk about, like the territorial imperative, how humans and always form territories, and then we protect our territories. That's why we have cities and states and regions and countries, and humans have in their amygdala to form this territory, and we fight about it all the time, and we catch ourselves all the time holding our territory, and so I've got all kinds of these books. This is like, man, let's see, Our Inner Ape. And because I love that kind of sociological approach to thinking of territory, humans, and how did religions form? Okay, let's do the 7 deadly sins, and then we'll discuss which of these slides kind of hit upon it. Now, these were selected by a pope, Pope Gregory. Oh, it's 590. Okay, that's even later. Pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, sloth. So remember, the Catholic Church believes in original sin. So you start out having all these sins embedded in you, pride, greed, and then you think back to primitive man. Is it possible that pride paid off? That made you self-confident, able to succeed. Greed, you could conquer more territory. You could provide more for your clan. And so that, while greed doesn't seem like a good thing in modern times, maybe then it was. Of course, lust was, mating and building the family, the clan. Envy was seeing someone else's territory and say, well, maybe I'll take some of that. Gluttony is a good one. I was guilty of that on Valentine's night. I had such a nice dinner that I ate too much. But gluttony can be anything. And at one time, if the antelope was killed, it was probably wise to eat as much as you could because you didn't know when the next antelope would get killed. It might be a month from now. In wrath, being angry at others, sloth, being able to lay back and sleep off the kill, and all the. So you look at these. Why did the Pope pick these as sins? And fortunately, another Pope came along and said, okay, there is a virtue that balances out each sin. So what balances pride is humility. Interesting, it's kind of back to yin and yang. What balances greed is charity. Wouldn't we like to be more charitable? But then if you say, well, it's nice for you to give $100 to that cause, but why don't you give everything you have to that cause? You say, whoa, whoa, whoa. I need a little bit of greed here because then I might lose my group. So lust is balanced by chastity, but if chastity was the only thing that existed, there'd be no more comer-uppers, no more kids. And envy is balanced by kindness, gluttony by temperance, wrath by kindness, sloth by diligence. Okay. I think that hits here's one final one. The proposal is that there's a curve that we overlap at some point, and this is just an imaginary line I put on here. Over on the left-hand side, we start with sin as very high, born, and you could make the argument that every 2-year-old has a lot of sin in them because they don't think about others. They're busy trying to get the biggest cookie, getting the best attention from mom and dad. They don't want to share the lap with another 2-year-old. So they're pretty territorial and then low on helping others. I remember when Lauren got in a little tiff as a 3-year-old, she told the other little girl, my mommy's going to come and beat up your mommy. And so she wasn't going to take on this little girl who was pretty good size herself. But that was like, instead of working out the friendship, she was going to start a little war. I don't think Melanie and Brandy became good friends after that because it was fun to laugh about. And but that's how it starts out. So where does it cross over in our age that we start going more to virtue and less to self? And how do we stay there if we get there? We say virtuous one day, but then someone takes away some of our territory, and then we fall back into tribal thinking. Okay, so that's the key concepts for me. And I want to say, which of these many slides said something to you that you'd like to kick around as a part of this time we have for the presentation? Say, man, that one has something. So just switch off mute and add your thought.
Patrick, the last
Yeah, please, Jeff. The last one.
yeah, are there not degrees of how we move? Actually, it's the one just before this. From pride to humility, aren't there various other types of characteristics or behaviors or that move from one to the other?
Oh, yeah, I sure say yes. And remember, this was one pope's idea. We could probably, as a group, list 100 sins and 100 virtues. And yeah, there's kind of like you could say a transition, like on greed and charity. It's hard to get a 2-year-old to even share their toys with someone. Now we're adults, we're busy saying, how much of my wealth or my good do I feel comfortable sharing and giving away as a part of charity? And so that would be kind of a degree thing. And we probably fluctuate even from one day to another, one year to another on all of these. Yeah.
Relationship too, I think, would be part of it. I mean, how much do I like this person or that
Yeah,
organization? Yeah.
right.
Yeah, Patrick, I've
Hey, Joe.
recently been reading somewhat about prehistory, which is a very difficult concept because it's prehistory.
Yeah.
But a lot of scholars now believe that as we came out of the last ice age, we were much more spiritual and much more peaceful. And as the ice sheets receded, we became much more territorial, and thus started a lot of the conflicts that we see throughout history. And a lot of your slides and stories that you're showing here, I think kind of back that up. There are many legends of very peaceful races and people exporting peace, and kindness after the end of the Ice Age. And then that all started to disappear as time went on. And of course, we kind of see that in the Bible as well, with the story of Adam and Eve, and then going on into chaos. So I think a lot of your slides really hit on a lot of those points that probably as we came out of the Ice Age, we were a much more peaceful society. And as time went on, we became much more competitive.
Yeah. I love that, Joe. I think that it very likely did happen that different cultures, whether South America, had different.
Right.
And I read one book on the called Evolution of Consciousness, when we started realizing in our brain there are others out there that we can't see. We were very practical for a while. If I can't see the other tribe, I don't know they're right over the hill, then that's one thing. But when do I start believing there's someone on the other side of the world that's acquiring territory that might annex? And then we start getting more protective. And yeah, maybe those cultures, Joe, were they kind of knew where their boundaries were. They had gotten to a sharing place. And then
Right.
they realized, oh my gosh, here comes another tribe that just landed on our shore.
Right.
Now we think we have to fight them off rather than share with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe think about when you brought that up, Joe, was that all of you have probably heard of that spiral dynamics spiral, that our spirituality, this is the same message, kind of repeats that stage we're at in our life. At first, we're just trying to survive, and then there's security, and then there's energy and power. Of course, we'd like to spiral up there to be the center for universal oneness and be free of all these things that inhibit us. But it's so easy for our little amygdala to get triggered, and we spiral back down to energy and power or security or something. Yeah.
Right. And that explains the individual and society. Everything goes through those same stages that you're displaying.
And we all know in politics, not to get political here, but if you can scare the amygdala that the issue is about security or power to drop to a lower level, then you go back to a lower level of thinking in terms of what a country's rules and democracy is supposed to mean.
Is this some ways mirror Maslow's hierarchy?
Interesting, you should say that. Let's see, I think I've got that in here somewhere, Jeff, but it does. All of these are kind of, maybe I didn't put that in there, but for sure. And they're all models that are trying to say, how do we get more spiritual, and then how do we fall back? And that base of the Maslow's was security. It's like, if I'm not eating, my family is starving. That was the underlying message of that movie, Les Mis. Then I'm going to steal bread from someone because I want to feed my family. And is that really a sin at that point? So all of us are prone to dropping down to a lower level if we get in a fear mode. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I don't know if it's an orchestrated thing or not, but after World War II, for instance, when Africa was divided up between the winning nations
Right.
for resources and not on tribal boundaries,
Right.
it's kept Africa in chaos forever. And I don't know if that was just being unthoughtful or actually contrived a little.
Yeah.
Because here we are 80 years later, and Africa, which is full of resources and should be prospering, is always just devastated and starving and a mess and stuff.
Yeah, the result of colonization.
Yeah, and I just feel like the whole, I read a Pulitzer Prize winning book recently called Trust, and was trust anyway, but the whole idea was about, in this case, rich men orchestrating their remembrance, or how they are remembered and stuff like that. And a lot of times it was a smart wife behind him who got erased, right? who got erased. And just so many things. I just see this fear thing, the amygdala, what you're talking about this is the thing that countries and the world and everybody uses to control us, to not think, instead of thinking of the solution, we're thinking how to protect ourselves. So we're we're going inward. And
that's interesting thoughts there, Barbara. Love it. And was it by accident or intentional that if you break up a group's territory, you divide them and they're less likely to rebel because they've lost their, and I have our suspicions on that. Our daughter, who does a lot of work on economics in Africa, would, I think, agree with you, Barb, that a lot of that was intentional divisions, lines drawn to keep one group from having.
I mean, the classical case is the Hutsi and Tutus were divided by the Belgians. I can't remember which one was a minority, but the minority was given the power so that they would always fight for the Belgian side. Otherwise, if they didn't have the Belgians behind them, they wouldn't have the power. So yes, it was very intentional.
Yeah, that's good to hear that history, Joe.
I think anytime we divide, we're making it easier for those oppressors to conquer.
Right. Absolutely.
When I look at this Adam and Eve, and I too was raised a Catholic, so in later life, when I've heard of people talking about they were raised in a loving Christian environment, I'm like, well, where the hell was that? I sure didn't see any of it, because Catholicism, fire and brimstone. But again, several of these messages are the woman is at fault. And you're right. I do take it personally. The woman is at fault for bringing this. I'm sorry, whose fault is it really? A weak man, perhaps, for falling for it? I'm tired of taking the rap and then seeing the current political environment lambasting the fact that we do anything other than procreate.
Mhm.
Yes.
So,
Well,
a little
Terry,
testy on the
if-
subject.
Terry, if you're getting angry about that, do not go into Roman history because the Romans blame everything on women.
I do remember a little bit of that from my background. It's just, I think that all religions have found that to be the easy way.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, let's,
Yeah.
but to Barb's comment, you know, Einstein had said that many of his great, wonderful, epiphanies really came from his wife. And I think that throughout history, there have been many, many examples of that. And women who are not normally as prideful as men have been okay, being the woman behind the man, have been happy to be in that position and not fought for the center stage. And I'm not suggesting that we do, but I just feel like in our current political environment, the more talk that goes on, the more radical, divisive talk has us focusing on those words while their actions in the background are really where our attention should be.
Terry, Mickey and I both read a book that was a biography of Mrs. Einstein, and she pretty much had the original thoughts about the theory of relativity and started work on it, and then they worked together for a while, and then he took over and made it, his thing.
Yeah, I assume you're talking about his first wife.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Jeff, the interesting part about that, I mean, not just Einstein, but a lot of women couldn't get published, right? At that time, women couldn't get published. So they went in the men's name, and then not only did they use their name, but then the men took the credit for it themselves, not just to help their wives get their work published. And I could see, I also have read about Einstein's wife. They were both brilliant physicists, right? But the two of them together made a much bigger brain, right? And after they were divorced, Einstein never had any more great insights.
Didn't know that.
That's pretty interesting.
That's pretty
yeah.
telling.
Yeah, but he
Yeah,
had a
yeah.
lot of sex then.
Well, and not only that, but and I don't mean this to be political, but it's what's truly happening right now with this DEI thing at NASA. The black, I don't know her name, I'm sorry, the black woman who was like the human computer. And she was doing all before the computers were working, and John Glenn wouldn't even go up unless she did the calculations, right? That she had to do everything. She's been erased from the NASA thing, nothing about her there. And another woman I just read on Facebook who's still alive, her stuff has been taken down from NASA like they don't exist, right? Because we can't have any women on there because that's DEI.
Right.
Isn't the Hidden Figures movie, Hidden Figures?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was it. That was about her,
Well, and to go backwards, that would be the ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, that if the culture hasn't advanced and the spirituality hasn't advanced, the individual gets held back and vice versa. And
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, good point.
and so we're watching even now politically is, well, where is our culture? A lot of us were like shocked is, well, there's a lot of the culture that's in a fear, survival thinking. And so they felt the solution was to vote this way, as opposed to a abundance, let's help people more thinking. And so that spiral dynamics took us back a notch, and now we have to re-energize.
Yeah.
And we're doing that all the time ourselves spiritually. Well, are we thinking of ourselves as sinful, needing to be fixed, or blessed, just needing to release more of our goodness?
When I was raised in the Lutheran church, and you had to be 16 to get communion, and I came away from communion thinking, well, this makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
Makes no sense because I have this original sin that I can't ever get rid of. And the only time I'm all good is the minute I take communion, and the minute I'm done, it starts over again. Oh, I couldn't see the sense of it at all, unless you just start with a clean slate so there was less sin for a while. I don't know.
I have that book, Born to Be Good. That's a
Yeah.
good one to read too. But
Oh, nice.
well, Anita, probably. I'm glad you're all adding in. We'll have to go to coffee talk because I haven't even got to some of you. But it in a way reflects what I attend some of the board meetings still, and the worship committee. I know those meetings say, how do we attract more people to our Center for Universal Oneness? And we're really an outlier group. So we're trying to say, if we're here or hope to be here as best as we can practice it, how do we attract someone who's at a lower, not a lower level, but a different level, who says they want doctrine, they want religion, they want answers, all the things that we're thinking about here. They say they wouldn't want to attend this because we're not given the answer. We're given
Right.
the perplexities. And so that's a challenge for us is our group tries to attract others. Melanie hasn't loaded in, but I'll set her up here for one final thing. And I suspect with that spiral dynamics is people vibrate, the thoughts they put out there are kind of based at where they're at in that cycle. Are they thinking self? Or are they thinking fear? If I'm thinking fear, I'm going to vibrate and send that energy out. And you have anything to conclude on that, Melanie, before we go to our meditation?
Well, I did raise my hand to contribute a
I
little
missed it.
earlier. So my thought was that the yin and yang, that got a little of everything going on, and the energy of the universe is the energy of the universe. So when we are attached to, like, those 7 deadly sins, which you said could perhaps be virtues, it seems to me it's an attachment issue. When we stay attached to, say, for example, greed started out with, well, let's get some more food for the community, for the tribe. And perhaps here at Center for Universal Oneness, greed represents itself like, how do we get more people to come to us? And then when we stay attached to that and we don't allow ourselves then to be calm and centered in how do we move forward in a peaceful way, meaning we notice what's going on and then we stay attached to it, there's our difficulty, I think. So our challenge, I think, spiritually is to notice whatever it is that we have an initial reaction to, or we're wanting to do, or we have an initial anger or whatever. And then we don't stay attached to that. We allow it to transform into a peaceful, good solution that's helpful for ourselves and others.
As always, you're very wise, Melanie.
Okay, I am going. So we're definitely going to have to continue into coffee talk because I didn't even get to hear from everyone. And all of you, I appreciate this community in the sense it seems like everyone has got some insights that are helpful. And I miss hearing everybody's. So what I was going to do on our is combine our meditation with the lyrics of a song. Let me fast forward this.
Get our motor running.
We're doing I want to do Van Morrison's song. Now, this has been done before here, and not too long ago, and I thought, darn, I was wanting to do that. So I want to do it a little differently. I want to have you look at the lyrics first. Van Morrison was an Irish kind of mystic, so I kind of relate to him that way, Northern Ireland. So his heritage was Scottish and Irish. And in 1970, he wrote this song really as kind of as a prayer, but everyone has had their opinion of what he was saying. So it's a good song in the sense of the lyrics mean something to everyone. And so when I went to the web to figure out, well, what do these lyrics mean? Let's see if I can go. I found hundreds of opinions. But so when he says we were born before the wind, he's talking about evolution, about humans, and also younger than the sun. By the way, he had such a thick accent, people can't even agree if he said also or if he said also. And so that's still out there. Here, the Bonnie Boat was one. One was what he was saying. He says, most lyrics say the word one, but the Bonnie Boat was a boat that rescued a leader of a region in Scotland and took that person to safety. And the Scottish Society was waiting for that person to come back and help save the society. So the Bonnie Boat got a name. So it's not like there was a boat in the harbor named the Bonnie Boat. This is a mystic concept of a savior being hidden from the warring group that was coming to get him, and then taken back to the Scottish culture. So they sailed into the mystic, which was hide. Then hark, they hear the sailors cry, smell the sea, feel the sky, let your soul spirit fly into the mystic. So he's trying to get people to think of this as bigger than us, that you can be in the mystic. And maybe, and the foghorn blows means that whenever a ship is coming in, the foghorn blows, or when it's leaving, it blows. So he's playing with terms here and say, sometimes we're coming home, sometimes we're leaving to go somewhere. And that's part of why sometimes this is a song played at a person's funeral. I wouldn't mind it having being played at mine. So when we're leaving and the foghorn blows, we're going into the mystic or our next life or heaven or whatever. When we're coming home, it's welcoming us. So maybe we're coming back into life. So anyway, his bottom line there is you don't have to fear it. He doesn't fear it. You don't have to fear it. And he wants to rock your gypsy soul, simply means get you excited about life. And then he repeats that concept of the foghorn. So instead of a meditation, I'm going to have Kyle play that song, and it's going to have the lyrics on it. And I want you to use that as your little meditation about this concept of sin and blessing, and think that it's all the same. We're going into the mystic.